Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Vijana Vallabha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Yashodanandana Brajajanuranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanuranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Yashodanandana Brajajanuranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Nitai Guru Pramanande Hari Hari Bo Agyanatimirandasya Ganangana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svabhadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahrijatam Sahakana Kanarakatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sadagana Lalita Shri Vikam Tam Vitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sutta Devi Prananami Hari Priye Vanchakapaturubhyascha Kripasindhu Vyavacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. So, today we'll be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 14 and verse 43. Thank you all so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I will try my best to honor this verse and our lineage by offering some reflections on this verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, reading from text 43. Vinisichityevam rasyo Vipannasya mahipatehi Mamanto uram tarasa Tatrasid bahuko naraha Vinischityevam rasyo Vipanasya mahipatehi Mamanto uram tarasa Tatrasid bahuko naraha Vinischityevam rasyo Vipanasya mahipatehi Mamanto uram tarasa Tatrasid bahuko naraha. Please repeat. Patehi Mamantam uram tarasya Vinishittevam rashayo Mamantam uram tarasa Tatrasid bahuko naraha Vinishittevam risayo Vipanasya mahipatehi Mamanta uram taharasa Tatrasid bahuko naraha. Translation. After making a decision, the saintly persons and sages churned the thighs of the dead body of King Vena with great force and according to a specific method. As a result of this churning, a dwarf-like person was born from King Vena's body. Purport. by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. That a person was born by the churning of the thighs of King Vena proves that the spirit soul is individual and separate from the body. The great sages and saintly persons could beget another person from the body of the dead King Vena, but it was not possible for them to bring King Vena back to life. King Vena was gone, and certainly he had taken another body. The saintly persons and sages were only concerned with the body of Vena because it was a result of the seminal succession of the family of Maharaj Dhruva. Consequently, the ingredients by which another body could be produced were there in the body of King Vena. By a certain process, when the thighs of the dead body were churned, another body came out. Although dead, the body of King Vena was preserved by drugs and mantras chanted by King Vena's mother. In this way, the ingredients for the production of another body were there. When the body of the person named Bahuka came out of the dead body of King Vena, it was really not very astonishing. It was simply a question of knowing how to do it. From the semen of one body, another body is produced, and the life symptoms are visible due to the souls taking shelter of this body. One should not think that it was impossible for another body to come out of the dead body of Maharaj Vena. This was performed by the skillful action of the sages. So as we're nearing the end of this particular chapter, let's have a brief summary of what happens in this 14th chapter. So we have a number of things that go on here. So of course, we're still dealing with Maitreya instructing Vidura. In this particular chapter, Maitreya is instructing Vidura how there are great sages, and they are always concerned with the spiritual development and upliftment of the common man. And so saintly persons were there to advise and to encourage the spirituality of the citizens in the kingdoms, and they did that via giving advice to the rulers or the kings. So we learn about King Anga. King Anga was a very wonderful, ideal leader. He was both saintly and sinless, and he really embodied everything it meant to be a good leader for the people, leading his people to spiritual life. However, King Anga, we learn, had a problem. He was not able to produce any sons. However, because he was a good devotee and a saintly person, he offered suitable worship, and thereby he obtained a special kind of mystical pot of rice that was boiled in milk. So he then offered that to his wife, and when she accepted it, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son named Vena. The only thing is this son, the son of King Anga and Sunita, he actually was the complete opposite of the king. He turned out to be very cruel, very senseless, and very proud. So what did the great King Anga do? Well, because he was such a wonderful, saintly king, and he was coming into his old age, he actually saw it from the perspective of being a great benediction. Why a benediction? To have such a frustrating heir? Well, he saw that it actually helped him to become detached from family life. So he renounced all of his kingdom and his family and his life, and he went off into the forest, never to be seen again. The kingdom was therefore left in disarray, and everyone went to look for him. And they searched far and wide in the forest, but he could not be found anywhere. So the advisors, the sages, they feared for the whole world, because remember, at this time, the king was not just the king of a small section of the planet. This was the king of the entire world that we live in today. So without a monarch to retain law and order for the people and to guide the people in the right direction, the sages immediately began to fear that thieves and rogues would spread chaos throughout the entire world, taking advantage of there being no leader. Thus, against the wishes of the ministers, the son Vena was thus made the king by the sages. However, Vena, as we were reading about in these past few verses, was a very proud person. And convinced of his own infallibility, what did he do? What did he actually do? What was pretty much the worst thing that he did? Does anyone remember? Yes, he stopped the religious sacrifices. He tried to stop all religious practices, in fact, and he instructed that who should be worshipped instead? Yes, that he himself, the king, should be the object of worship. So Vena was actually declaring himself as to be better than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, when the sages understood this actually made them very angry. So the sages, knowing that the common man would slip into degradation if they were not being shown a good example by their leader, decided to actually eliminate Vena, to ensure that the citizens did not degrade into animalistic practices. Because without the example of leadership and without a king there or a leader there for the citizens, the common people of the world, to show them what is the right way forwards, typically society will degrade into animalistic practices without direction. So even though the sages had coronated Vena to protect the citizens from the thieves and rogues and to elevate them, King Vena actually became worse than the enemy to those citizens. So we can understand that when a ruler sets a good religious example, what happens to them when we have a good example of a ruler like we had with King Anga? They actually become more advanced in their own sadhana, and this in turn, the reciprocation is there, and it encourages the citizens to become free from material entrapment by engagement according to their Varna ashram designation. But to have that, you need to have an example. There needs to be, the structure of the Varna ashram needs to be there. Otherwise, the people of the world become lost and confused, and they do not have any shelter. So one of the significant verses in this chapter is verse 20, as it actually summarizes the whole of Vedic civilization. And the whole of Vedic civilization is based upon the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the emphasis. And how do we do that? We do that by engaging in our respective Varna ashram duties. So in the purport, in verse 20, Srila Prabhupada says that ISKCON was actually started to convince the general population to adopt the best process to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus become happy and peaceful. So we can have a quick look at that verse. So the translation is, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is worshipped by the great demigods who are controllers of universal affairs. When he is satisfied, nothing is impossible to achieve. Yay! So for this reason, all the demigods, presiding deities of different planets, as well as inhabitants of their planets, take great pleasure in offering all kinds of paraphernalia for his worship. So within the purport of this verse, Srila Prabhupada describes his analysis of what he saw and could understand that the world, and of course the Western world too, what he saw and why within it he actually is explaining how he came up with the 7 purposes of ISKCON. Now let's all remember that this is our 60th year. This year we'll be celebrating 60 years since ISKCON was incorporated right here in New York City. This is the place where Srila Prabhupada came up with these 7 purposes. So let's just skim through this purport where he's describing what he sees is the struggle of the civilization today, bearing in mind that he was situated here in New York City at that time. So he says, human society, however, has artificially created a type of civilization which makes one forgetful of their relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that this modern society even enables one to forget the Supreme Personality of Godhead's grace and mercy. So this means that this is why modern man, women, all beings are constantly unhappy and constantly searching for things. We can see that in our cities. Constantly we're being encouraged to consume more and more and more. And for a moment we have a moment of happiness. But the happiness isn't in attaining that thing, it's in the chase of that thing. And as soon as we attain it, it's no longer, we just need more because we're actually interested in the chase. The thing itself isn't satisfying, and it will never be satisfying because it doesn't connect us to Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada came here to remind people, to help them remember Krishna, and he had a systematic way of doing this. When I just said that there about how it's actually the chase, I was actually reminded of George Harrison's song, The Art of Dying, where there's actually a lyric in it, and he says that something along the line of, the more and more that we want something, but then when we get it, there is no need for it. It's one of my favorite, actually, songs of the late George Harrison. So, who we understand was also a wonderful devotee and disciple of Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada again writes in this purport, he's very strong about this, how actually today's leaders are always encouraging to follow a path which is being ignorant of the laws of God, and then they're following leaders down this blind path of unhappiness. So in order to rectify the world, people should be trained in Krishna consciousness in accordance with the Varnashram system. And that this will, and ultimately, by satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we will solve all these problems that we have in today's world. So, we can briefly look upon what are these 7 purposes of ISKCON. So, the first thing is to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and educate all people for the imbalance and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. So these different purposes are exactly why we're here, situated in these cities of the world, and why Srila Prabhupada came to New York City itself, which the only reason that any of us are here is to preach Krishna consciousness. Here we can really spread Krishna consciousness far and wide. If we wanted to only be concerned with developing our own spiritual lives, we would seek out a peaceful place, a place in the nature and so on. And I'm going to touch upon that again. So we can all remind ourselves, and I deeply encourage you, especially this year, to remind yourselves what the 7 purposes of ISKCON are, to really celebrate why we're all here and what is our mission. And really think about that, meditate upon that, particularly this year. So, back to the verse that we're at today. Vena had been advised to facilitate the citizens for their spiritual development, but the foolish Vena demanded that he himself receive worship. So, we understand in this chapter that the sages, they didn't, even though they knew Vena was unqualified, yet they knew that there had to be a king coronated before the world turned into chaos. Then they saw that Vena was not doing so well, and they went to him to try and advise him to tell him there's a reason that we have these sacrifices, there's a reason that this has to go on. But Vena, being so proud and so arrogant, decided not to listen to the sages and tell them that they actually didn't know what they were talking about. At this point, they understood that he had become too spoilt by the opulences in which he gained whilst coming to the throne. And Maitreya described to Vidura that the sages were so alarmed that Vena had actually become envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the conclusion was that Vena should be deposed before he caused anyone any further mischief. So of course, this was the final thing. It was the final option. After all, courses of action had been tried, the sages concluded that the only thing that could happen was that they had to end Vena. So we understand that because Vena had already done so many offenses, it was very easy towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It was very easy for the sages to end his life, so they simply used mantras. The mother of King Vena, of course, the mother never stops loving the child, so she wanted to preserve the body of Vena rather than burn him on the funeral pyre. And this gave an opportunity for the sages to utilize Vena's DNA, since he was none other than the descendant of Dhruv Maharaj. They wanted to use the materials of his body to create a qualified king. And the following chapter after this, we start to learn about the glories and the appearance of none other than King Prithu, who is a Shaktivesh avatar. So let's together have a look at the different examples of how King Vena was a bad leader, the different things that he did. I'm going to run through these, and then I'm going to ask for some interaction, and I'm going to ask you to give me examples of what a good leader should do, with taking this into context. So we read about how King Vena was cruel, how he used his power for his own gain, how he did not prove a good example, and he had no service attitude, that he himself was seeking worship, how he was proud, and how he banned religious sacrifice. He did not show a good example to the people, and he did not lead them to salvation. He offered no path for enlightenment and improvement of the people. So those are just some of the examples that I've given. I'm sure there are very many more. So can anyone give some examples of what a good leader should do, in contrary to what King Vena did? Yes. Yes, a good leader, one more, I'll just repeat what you said for everyone. A good leader should provide a foundation and a good moral structure for the people. Yes, very nice. Yeah, thank you. Microphone is coming.
The good leader will be the best example for his followers.
Yes, the good leader will be a very good example for the followers. And it's interesting to mention that there are followers, that there are citizens. So a good leader not only leads by example, but also provides shelter for all of the citizens, all of the followers, so that they can do what they need to do and not be concerned or have to compete with one another. Any other ideas of what a good leader should do in context of thinking what is the opposite of what King Vena did? Yes, following the advice of his ministers. And in this way, we can understand more about the practical need for the structure of Varnashram. So, just to again summarize what's happening in this chapter. This chapter deals with Maitreya's continuing instruction of Vidura, and that saintly and Brahminical people are always concerned with the upliftment of the ordinary citizen in the world. Traditionally, sages were always there to instruct and advise the rulers how to achieve this. However, after the saintly and wonderful King Anga, there was no suitable ruler. So Vena was coronated against the advice of those who knew him, because they knew that he was cruel and proud. So when Vena stopped all religious practices, the sages knew that the common citizen would suffer degradation into animalistic life. We've learned that by setting a good personal example, the leader makes advancement and encourages the citizens to become elevated and avoid material entrapment. Citizens are to be engaged according to the Varnashram principles. So again, because we're talking about Varnashram, looking again at verse 20, we actually see that this is a Sangraka, a data, a summary, a compilation of the whole of chapter 14. Basically, it gives us the main understanding that Vedic civilization, that Varnashram, is all about the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu, and that when we engage according to Varnashram propensity, that we will in fact satisfy Lord Vishnu and we will be happy and peaceful. So we understand that that's actually why Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish ISKCON, to create a society and create a system and a structure that the common man could follow and therefore elevate himself according to his propensity and nature. So we've already discussed a little bit about the 7 points, and as I say, please, I very much encourage you to look at those, meditate upon those for this year, talk about them amongst your friends and other devotees. And of course, we'll be celebrating our 60th year of ISKCON's incorporation. In that celebration, we'll be really looking at the journey of Srila Prabhupada, how he came here to New York City, and how he became such a prominent leader in a short space of time, simply by humbly submitting to the orders of his spiritual master and allowing himself to be the vessel of the message of Lord Chaitanya. We celebrate where we are now and look towards the future of who we will become. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more shortly. So we've covered what good examples of leadership are. And we're looking forward to the next chapter where we learn more about King Prithu, who's going to really show us the wonderful example of good leadership. And we've touched upon Varnashram. One of the things here that's really interesting, the other theme that I saw here is actually recycling. So we see that, as it describes here in the purport, the sages understood that the body, we are not the body. And similarly, Vena was not the body. The spirit soul, the jiva of Vena had already, it's described in the purport, had already since left that body and gone on to, being in another body. But that this body shouldn't be wasted because it has very good materials, good building blocks. So they understood that even though Vena had been inhabiting this body, this machine of that he was not that body himself, so that the materials that were left behind were still very good and should be used to form a new king. Just in the same way that we know that when a lot of the time, we know we have 24-karat gold, and 24-karat gold is pure gold, and it's soft and it's beautiful. But in order for it to be used, a lot of the time it has to have something else added to it, which changes its quality. So rather than being soft and malleable, it actually becomes much harder and fixed in the form that it's moved into. So in a similar kind of way, we can understand that the sages understood that first they had to extract some of those impurities that were put into this body that formed King Vena. So they decided to churn the thighs of the king. And by doing so, just in the same way when they churned the great ocean, the first thing that came out was actually a poison. So the first thing that came out of this body was actually the impurities, the things which had made it so, or influenced it so that King Vena had these selfish thoughts and quarrelsome and cruel nature. And it's interesting to look at this concept of the recycling, so that we can actually understand that here on the earth, everything that is in this material creation from the moment of its inception has always remained the same. So all of the atomic structure, all of the molecules that we're all made of have remained the same. So I'll touch upon that a little more. So they actually churned this King Vena's body to purge the sins and to preserve the lineage. So we understand that it's written here in this particular verse that this dwarf comes out called Bahuka, and that doesn't sound very attractive and is short and with short limbs and dark skin and red hair and red eyes. Kind of sounds like an interesting, like a troll or something like this. And so that this is actually understood to be have absorbed King Vena's sins, and he actually becomes the leader of like these tribal race of persons who live in the forests and hills. So we understand later on, it is written how actually from the upper parts of the king's body there comes the material that's used, which actually then produces the vehicle for King Prithu and his wife. So just as I was explaining how gold is, it's difficult actually to get, once the gold has been alloyed with another metal to make it harder and change its qualities somewhat, it's actually quite hard to remove that. I have a friend who actually, I had some of this material, and I said, I would like for it to, to be made into more. And so, of course, it was going to lose some of its qualities. She said to me, this is, once I mix this, it's very hard to change it back again. But I said, no, let's do this. So only the sages, they were qualified to do this, to do a special kind of mantras and a special kind of process, and they were able to remove these impurities. So just as gold is, there is a certain amount of gold on the earth. I have no idea how much it is. I'm sure there's still some hidden within Mother Bhumi, but it's the same gold. There's a certain amount of gold which exists, and we've been trying for hundreds and thousands of years. We can't make it more gold come. There's only the gold that is there. In the same way, today, the whole of our city is covered in like more than 10 inches of thick snow. It's unbelievable. Many of us didn't believe it was going to happen, but here it is. And in many ways, it's kind of beautiful, although it's going to hinder some people in their day-to-day business. And in the same way that gold, the same gold which is being used on a crown of a king today could be the same gold which was used in a king 10,000 years ago, and it's gone through a process of being melted down, moved here and there. The same thing is true of all of the atoms that are here in the world. The same thing is true of that water which is now snow outside. That same snow was one time, at some point, it would have been on the Himalayas. At some point, it would have been drank through the body of our ancestors. At some point, through the body of, creatures and beings that have long since gone on this earth. It just goes round and round again. So all the elements on the earth are actually recycled. It's actually the only thing which makes it pure. And when we want to, we try to offer something that is pure, is what? What is the only thing that gives that the potentiality for that thing to be pure? It's the mantra, and within that mantra, it's our intention. It's the intention that makes the thing pure, so that it can be offered to the Lord. So every living entity on the planet is composed of actually, the same things. And where does that come from? It's the same 6 foot of the planet's topsoil. So we can understand that. So we can go back to Varnashram here. Varnashram is about living in accordance to our nature, having a structure for the civilization so that it can move forwards and attain a path to spiritual evolution. And of course, not just for the people, but for all beings, all things are on this path of spiritual evolution. And this is one of the designs of the Varnashram system. So everything, all obviously the coals and the metals, they're formed deep within the earth, but every organic life form from the beings that live up here on the land, to the things that live deep in the ocean, which when we see them, we're like, wow, it's like another planetary thing. They're all formed from the same 6 foot of topsoil. So this is a wonderful thing when we can start to think, wow, we really, we get the opportunity when we follow something like this system that's being given to us as Varnashram, that how we can honor Mother Bhumi and how she is very much a part of us, and how the future lies within moving forwards with that, and how it was Srila Prabhupada's desire to actually really give this structure to the world, and how it actually creates a formula for us to be very much at the forefront of modern thinking and to fulfill the needs of what's missing from the world today. So we can see that understanding that we're actually all created from the same materials, the thing that makes us individual is is the jiva that's within us. And obviously we're all dealing with coverings and then many different years of lifetimes of lessons that we need to learn. But essentially this is about there's a recycling that's going on at the atomic level for everything that's happening here in the material world, and it only gets renewed and made new once again at the very dissolution of all things, where it gets sucked back in again and put back to an original state. So essentially we can understand that we are trying to offer something to the Lord, and the way that we make that pure and good is by our intention and by our desire to be Krishna conscious. So Varna Ashram gives an opportunity for understanding more about what is our purpose in the world, especially in relation to ecology. When I believe that when Srila Prabhupada was in his final years, he started to think about, I didn't get the opportunity to fully develop and realize the system of Varnashram, and it's needed in the world. And so this is wonderful because it relates to us here in New York. He actually said to devotees, and they asked him, how will you show us? He said, I will go to Gita Nagari, our farm that's very near us. The farm which was at one time was producing so much wonderful fresh produce for Shri Shri Radha Govinda and for the community, and is now starting to do the same. He said, I will sit there and I will teach you about that way of life, so we can understand that it's about an agrarian lifestyle, and it's harmonious and in tune with Mother Bhumi, paying respects and understanding what is our relationship there, and fulfilling that need that the world is having right now, which is saying, more and more the next generations, they want to live a different type of life. They see that things have become out of balance. They want to be more aligned with the planet. They want to be more connected to one another. They want to be more emotionally aware and to care about the other living beings on our planet, and to not have pollution, to think about ways in which we can live more in harmony. So we can understand that the next generation's mission, our mission and going forwards, is really to complete that of Srila Prabhupada and to try to instate this Varnashram system for the world and for the society at large. We understand that we have the backbone, and that backbone is all of the institutions that we have, all of the temples that Srila Prabhupada set up and what we've been building upon. So some of you may know that we're shooting for the rhino, and one of the things that we want to do is create a vertical Varnashram in the building next door. And this will form a wonderful inspiration for the generations moving forwards, and really pay homage to our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada. So this really is a task for all of us here, of how we can establish this and how we can really show a living example of how this can actually work in modern society, and how we each have our own unique strengths. Understanding that although we're not, we all understand that we are not the body, but within the bodies that we're given different propensities and different skills, different things and ways in which we can be engaged to ultimately to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by doing that, we in ourselves become peaceful and happy. Many times, as young people in the world, there's a point where, from very young, and then, up to around like 21 or something, people are saying, what do you want to do? What is it that you want to do for the world? And that's it's wonderful because everyone has a purpose within them. Sometimes we don't know exactly what it is, because we can become confused by the modernity of the world. We're given so many different options that the best thing is if actually we have the good fortune to be born into the association of devotees in some way, shape or form, and therefore be guided and understand, okay, what are my actual skills? All of us have that wonderful experience of how whenever in the point of our life, whether born into it or whether later on in life, when we came into the association of devotees, we were being encouraged and empowered constantly to actually discover new skills that we never knew we had. And how wonderful this whole experience is, and how this really should encourage us to think about what ways can I, really pay homage to this lineage and pay my debt to Srila Prabhupada, and try to bring others into this wonderful movement that's been given to us. Because the most important thing in Varnashram is not to focus specifically on who is at the top, but to understand that if there's a structure, it's a bit like, often we're given the example of the body, and we have the head and the arms, the stomach and the legs. And this is, of course, the topmost example. I like to expand upon that a little further and try to understand how does the system work in a practical way. And what often comes to my mind is an image of, okay, if you have a fortified city, and in order for there to be a fortified city where the citizens are protected, there has to be some kind of a king and ministers who will control, make sure there is some kind of order that's going on, and that ultimately people are being led to spiritually evolve. In order for that to be there has to be advisors that will maintain that that's the mission of that administration of those kings, that they don't lose sight or have mission drift and think, oh, actually, let's all just have let's live nicely in our fortified place. So underneath those kings, there has to be some kind of commerce has to be there, so that there can be there has to be a material facility. There has to be some kind of opulence that's going on. Otherwise, if there isn't that kind of progress alongside spiritual progress, people will not be receiving sufficient shelter. But most importantly, then there are all the citizens of the city, and they're there to and they're the majority, and they need to be given shelter. They need to be given good leadership. They need to be taken care of, and they need to be shown and guided and given good association, and not be just left to we're only having a system where there's merchants and then there's citizens, so all that's happening is consumption. There needs to be good leadership so that there can be this spiritual evolution for all souls, all jivas in the world and citizens. So we can understand that we've been given the highest welfare work from what Srila Prabhupada has given us. We see there in the verse 20 how he has come and he's really trying to give us this structure for how we can do this, how we can set up centers, how we can encourage people, how we can bring people together. Recently, I was in India, and I was able to have the opportunity to revisit some different areas of South India. And I plan to talk about that more on Sunday. I will talk about a little bit about my experiences with reference to the South Indian tour of Lord Chaitanya. So we know that Lord Chaitanya went all the way around all of India, spreading the glories of Krishna and encouraging people to, take up this devotional practice of the Lord. And it's so wonderful to visit the different areas and see how this manifested. And it really is incredible. Even I went to see Lord Venkateshwara in Tirupati, and it takes a long time to get the darshan of the Lord there. It's very wonderful. I know other devotees have also been there, and the experience is just amazing. So many people, so eager to together go and see the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada tells us that this is Krishna. And what's amazing is actually what are devotees chanting there? They're chanting Govinda, which is so beautiful. And it was amazing. And it also just brings me back to that, the glory of Srila Prabhupada. If it wasn't for Srila Prabhupada, I'm sure, the Lord would have arranged another personality because it had to happen for Lord Chaitanya's mercy. But Srila Prabhupada is the one who brought this, who traveled the whole world and brought this mercy to all of us so that we can also chant Govinda and be a part of this absolutely beautiful, part, and brothers and sisters in Sanatan Dharma, and actually start to realize what is Varnashram and how can we practically apply it in today's world? How can we be more in tune, and how can we kind of, catch up with things? Back in the time of when Srila Prabhupada was here with us on the earth, and he was spreading this Krishna consciousness movement, in that time there were hardly any people who were vegetarian. I don't know, I think the vegan movement was maybe just about in its fledgling stages. No one really knew so much about yoga and these different, words which are thrown around today, like yoga and mantra and guru. These things were not so common, and now they're quite a part of the modern day culture. Now people are very much concerned with being healthy, but it was the devotees that basically came up with the first, cereal energy bars, the first things. It was the devotees that were at the forefront of that. So we need to remember that, and we need to understand this is all a part of our culture, and that it's not that we should become distracted by, but how we should be encouraging our grihastas, who are the majority of our society. We should be doing more to encourage our own devotional commerce and businesses happening, which will be supportive of cow protection and of simple living and high thinking. And we should be more supportive of our farm communities. Anyone that's been to India must go and visit the Govardhan Eco Village. The Govardhan Eco Village, we have a wonderful example. We've been winning, by the grace of all the devotees there, we've been winning wonderful prizes recognized by the whole world for the ecology that's going on there, in recognizing the sacredness of the water that exists and making sure that we use that properly. And again, you can see, I was talking about the recycling. One of the things that we win the prizes for there is what? It's the recycling of the water. So this is all, our culture is huge, and we have a foundation in a part of it, and it is our duty to spread it further, and this will keep us relevant, motivated, and bring our culture alive for the people today. So I'm going to end my reflections on this verse here and see if there's any comments or questions or corrections here today.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Thank you.
So there's two things I see with Chitraketu and this King Anga, but neither of them had the karma for a child, but they kind of went around their karma through some means, some saintly person, and ended up with a son, and it ended badly. I'm kind of curious if you have any. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. These two kings, Chitraketu and Anga, who their karma didn't allow them to have a child, but they went around it, and in both cases, the child became a source of misery, but it ended well. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, and it just popped in my head.
Well, the first thing that I think of is that there is actually a place in Vrindavan. Please excuse me because I can't remember the exact name of this place on the Parakram. But there's actually a place where one can go, and there's a special well, and if one is has the waters of this well put upon them, it's meant to bless them with, fertility. Specifically, this is done for women. And I believe that this is actually from one of the other lineages. It's actually understood that that's a place where Radha and Krishna were married by Lord Brahma. So even though it may not be in our karma, our destiny, to have a child, there have always been ways in which you can try to find a way around that. And today people are finding it difficult to conceive children, and oftentimes it can be that someone is only able to conceive a very specific window within their astrology, or that they need to do more, they need to pray more or offer more sacrifices, because without that they were not specifically destined to have a child. And we also see that nowadays people go to IVF, and it's very popular in India. And I'm often when I pass these places, I often travel on the bus in India. I go into a kind of a thought, just wondering, because we understand how in order to conceive a saintly child, there's a process of activities and of prayers and essentially of intention that goes on. And essentially we have to become very good examples for that jiva to become attracted into our sphere. And actually that these jivas, they don't just come specifically at that moment of conception, but they're attracted into our sphere in general. So when I go past these IVF places, I'm thinking, that's just so interesting that there somehow or other within this very sterile process of, someone's with a petri dish in, creating life like this, there are also somehow or other some kind of jivas waiting to jump into that situation. And I'm puzzled, and I'm thinking, how much then is it about, the ritual that goes on between the two, the man and the woman, and how much is it about, them as personalities, as spiritual beings on an evolutionary path that will attract that jiva. So these are just thoughts that come up on this. It's a big topic. I commenting on your particular question, about how is it that the essential thing is what always becomes important, especially when it's for the Kshatriyas, the rulers, is there must be an heir. If there is no heir, then we can see, even there was an unqualified heir here, and the sages put him into power, even though everyone knew this isn't a good decision. But there has to be one, because otherwise what happens is the whole of society plunges into, instead what you have are, I think it's even in, what is that, George Orwell's one about, I can't remember the title of it, but it's showing a potential about in the future of the world, if if the tyrants and the rogues were basically able to if they're the ones which gain control, rather than, I think in his thing it's the engineers who are the higher thinking persons. But if there is no heir, then what happens is everyone will compete, and the whole place goes into a chaos, as we see here. So even an unqualified is better than just allowing a turmoil to immediately happen, and for it to be a fight of the fittest, the dog-eat-dog world, and like for this to happen, for humans to literally, as it's written, to degrade into this animalistic propensity of like, you know, just fighting it out and competing for resources in this way. Like, essentially, I guess, how modern history describes like cavemen mentality would become the thing. But we understand that that isn't our history. Our history is much more rich and much more refined than that. We didn't, we didn't have a system where people were, essentially living in a caveman way. There's always been, and there should always be, this system where sages are able to advise and make sure that there is like some way in which the system for people to evolve spiritually is maintained. I hope that answers your question in some way. It doesn't. I don't think it answers it completely.
If there's a king and his karma doesn't allow for a child, then is it better to just accept the karma versus trying to go around it? And because it seems like the end result, in these cases they became detached, but it seems like the end result is extreme suffering. I was curious, is it better to just accept your karma? We hear about tolerate, but in these two examples, instead of tolerate, they try to find a workaround and suffering ensues.
Yeah, the thing is the king has a duty to the whole society, and he has to make sure, like, he will not be able to essentially leave his body and move on from life unless he knows that there is an heir of some kind. So that's one of the main things. Tulsi Prabhu, do you have anything more to add to this query?
Well, I was thinking it would depend on the level of the consciousness of the person. Like in Krishna consciousness, sometimes you see how much is your opportunity for sense gratification, and you say, okay, I'll just accept it and go with it, and because at the end of the day it's more important to serve Krishna. But sometimes devotees are not ready to accept, and they are trying to make arrangements to help them to get some extra wish fulfilled, extra desires. But from what I heard, it looks like that if you put more endeavors, you may be able to get some extra happiness. But at the end of the day, in your life, the amount of happiness and distress, they will be always in balance. So, in other words, let's say if your happiness is that much, and then you put some endeavors to increase the amount of your happiness, that means also the amount of your unhappiness will increase, because they cannot be out of balance. Like the moment you are born, it is said, okay, happiness, distress, 50-50, that's it. You cannot change this. But you can work hard and get, let's say, make more money, and in this way get more happiness. But then because of that, some suffering will come. Let's say you have more money, you can buy more things, but let's say you will get some disease because you work so hard. So this will give you the distress, and then again they will balance. So I guess if someone is very spiritually advanced, he'll just understand, okay, whatever comes on its own accord, Hare Krishna. But if he is not, he will want to push, like you gave the example with Chitraketu. He was not ready to accept the reality and he was pushing. But you're also right, Mataji, that for the king it's not just a question of the desire is there, but also it's a duty, because someone has to continue the lineage and take care for the throne, for the country.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on this class? Yes, thank you again. Looking forward to this one.
So, in terms of the Varnashrama discussion, which is a broad discussion, and it's very easy to understand the basic idea, but not so easy to apply. One thing that we see creates some difficulty in practical application is the idea that in Kali Yuga it is said that everyone is Varna Shankara, which means mixed Varna. So it's not exactly clear, and it's always surprising for ourselves and for others how we are going to act in a certain situation. Like, okay, let's say you are dressed as a brahmachari, but you may not act as a brahmachari in a certain situation, or you are dressed as a kshatriya, but you may not act as a kshatriya in a certain situation. So, do you have some practical observation or thoughts? What you're going to do about this?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, essentially, those of us who are here in the cities, our main purpose is to preach Krishna consciousness to the people. I think that on a practical way, to understand Varna Ashram more, we really need to develop our links with our farm communities. I think that when we are able to spend some time in the countryside, in a mode of goodness environment, and attempt to do simple living and high thinking, even just for, like a retreat type situation, we're able to actually reflect more about what our specific individual purpose is and realize more what our strengths are. I've said this before, but on reflecting what our strengths are, we can also understand the different things which we don't have, and how, in order to spread Krishna consciousness and be successful in that endeavor, how we actually need to draw upon others who do actually have those different qualities. And I think, a lot of, we're 60 years old as a movement. We're actually extraordinarily young, and but within that time, we've actually done a huge amount of things. And the structure that we have, even though at times we're like, where is the structure, or so on, we actually have an extraordinary structure if we compare it to the likes of the history of other religious movements that have come about in relatively recent history. So I think that we have done a lot of experimenting, and I think to some extent that is still there, but I don't have a full answer to what you're saying there, but I think that when everyone is given an opportunity to take part, and when they see positive examples of, okay, this is actually what it means to do devotional service. It means, we need to try and be selfless. We need to develop our devotion by, doing it not for any other reason, but not for our own facility or for our own comforts or needs or status, but to do it simply to please. And when we try to think, okay, how do I spot those things? You'll find that it's those people tend to be more, maybe they're more in the background, maybe not. But we need to really think, how can I be that positive example so that others, how can I be a leader in that way? It might not be that just, we don't have to, being a leader doesn't mean that you have to be, further up in the structure of the Varnashram. You can be a leader within your own, you can be a leader within your own circle. And that's very much appreciated. It doesn't mean that you have to be like a king or something. Thank you so much. Wonderful. But you can be that positive example within your community. And that will inspire others to, reflect upon what is my nature, or can I, in seeing someone else's example, we actually are caused to think more about I would like to be like that. But then in trying to be like that, we tend to discover a little bit more about ourselves when we're honest about it, because we see that is like us, or actually I'm much more skilled at these things. These are my strengths, and I need to draw upon other examples to actually gain the other things. That maybe somewhat answers your question. I think it's it's a difficult one, and as more and more as Kali Yuga goes on, we become more and more mixed up. But by trying to be examples and trying to be leaders within our own spheres, I think that we can help and encourage each other. Thank you so much. It's breakfast time 20 minutes ago, so I'm not going to carry on. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.